Welcome to my March book vlog. Coming to you today from my study again. Firstly, an apology. I do have some print books that I read this month, but I'm not going to be waving the covers at you today. I actually did my back in a few days ago. Don't ask me how. I was sitting in the chair, everything's fine. I stood up and bam. So pretty much since Sunday I've been crippled. It's getting better, but I didn't really want to be reaching up and down pulling things off shelves today, so I'm just going to go through them all without holding them up, but mostly it was ebooks again anyway. So a little bit lower this month. I only got through 11. I had a few things on, and then with this back pain I wasn't able to sit for periods and read, so I'm a couple down on my usual monthly total, but I'm still, I think, 3 ahead, at least 2, maybe 3 ahead on my Goodreads goal for the year, so we're still doing okay. So a lot of 4-star reads again this month, 1 5-star and a couple of lower ones, so I'll just kick off in the order I read them. First up, The Magician's Lie by Greer and Macallister. This was a NetGalley read. It's very hard to describe this book without giving too much away and ruining it, so I don't want to say too many things, but I did enjoy it. It was a 4-star. It's probably one to read if you like books like The Night Circus or Water for Elephants. It's a similar feel to that. It's sort of a magical realism, I guess you'd call it. Very enjoyable. The ending was maybe a little bit swift for my liking. There was quite a slow build and then suddenly it was over. But other than that, it was a good read, so definitely worth checking out. The next NetGalley run that I read was The Summer of Impossible Things by Rowan Coleman. Another 4-star read. This is a time travel story. What if you could go back in time and fix something that happened in your parents' lives, which would affect your future and what happened to them? Would you do it? Would you care about the consequences it might have for you personally? Like perhaps you wouldn't be born. Again, I don't want to give too much of the story away, but it was enjoyable. It's not one I'd reread. I think I enjoyed reading it. I got to the end, I was happy. It was a bit of a page turner, but having read it, it's not one that I'd want to go back and revisit in the future. I think once was enough. But if you're into that sort of story, apologies, that's my phone going off. If you're into that sort of story, then definitely check it out. And another NetGalley one was The Girl from Rawblood by Catriona Ward. 4 stars again. Now this one's a bit different from the previous 2 I've been talking about. It's a much darker read. It's got kind of gothic overtones. It's sort of, it describes itself, I think it classes itself as a horror story. I wouldn't say it was horror in the likes of Stephen King or Dean Koontz or anything like that. It wasn't scary. It's just a sort of spooky historical tale. And yet again, all the books I'm talking about this month, I've got to be really careful not to give too much away, but I know a few people have said in their reviews that they didn't like the narration style. It does jump back and forward a bit. There's a few different time periods, a few different narrators. I didn't find it a problem. I thought it was pretty easy to keep up with what was going on. There were a few twists, and some things that didn't make sense at the start made sense later once you got through the story. So as long as you don't mind a few narrators and a few jumping timelines, it's fine, and I felt it was pretty clear what was happening anyway. And another NetGalley one, and again the 4th in a row 4 stars, was London Curiosities by John Wade. This is one I wished for on NetGalley and was granted, and it's a non-fiction book, and it's taking a sort of traveller's look at London, but not the usual tourist sites. It's picking strange places and weird facts that you didn't know about London. This was a really interesting book. A few of the things that Wade talks about I knew, and I'd been to those places, come across the stories before, but some of it was new to me. It was quite interesting, like where these random bits of stone in different places originally came from. Again, like sort of little stories, little quirks about London that if you're someone who lives in London and doesn't really think about it and just wants something new to go and see, it's definitely great. And if you're a traveller who's maybe been before and done all the big tourist sites, that you want something a bit quirky about the history, something new to go and check out, then this book would probably be a good one to look at before you come. or go. I still talk about London as if I live nearby sometimes, but it did create a bit of nostalgia for me, because I do miss London at times, so cause it kind of made me think, oh, next time I go back I'm going to check out some of these places myself. Moving on, the next book is my only 5-star read for the month. This one is a paperback that I received for Christmas, and it's Paradise Reclaimed by Halldór Laxness. Anyone who's watched some of my previous posts will know that I love Halldór Laxness. Wonderful Icelandic author. This isn't my absolute favourite book of his. I've read 4 of them now, but it was still like a 5-star read, even though it wasn't my favourite. About a man who leaves Iceland and goes off to America to discover the Mormon way of life. Sounds a bit strange, but it's a very good story, and as always there's a sort of wry sense of humour and beautiful characterisation of all these key players, particularly the main character. Laxness paints wonderful portraits. He really brings his characters to life through these little quirks that they have. So if you haven't read any of his books, do read him, because he is wonderful. Independent People is his Nobel Prize winning book, so that's a good one to start with, although it is a longer one, but definitely check him out. I've still got quite a few of his that I still want to read, so I need to acquire some more later in the year, hopefully. Next up was a book I picked up in a second-hand book sale, Goethe's Faust. Now, I have read Faust before, but I read it in German, and this was when I was first learning German. It was quite a few years back, and it was a little bit of a struggle because I didn't quite have the vocabulary stretch, but I understood it, but I didn't get the nuances. So when I saw this copy in English, I thought it would be a good time to reread it and maybe just get a little bit more into it than I could with the German version. So I did read through it again, still really enjoyed it, and I did get a bit more out of it without that language barrier. So I think my German has improved since I tried to read it before, so it might be time to go back and give it another go in German and be a good test. I don't get to practice my languages so much these days, and definitely not as much as I'd like, so I might do that later in the year. Excuse me. 4 stars anyway, a brilliant play. Another NetGalley couple now. Social Media Just for Writers by Francis Cabala was a 4-star read for me. This book looks at breaking down social media, how you can use it as an author. It's a pretty far-reaching book because it covers everything from setting up a LinkedIn account to little quirks and things you can try on Instagram that are particularly good for promoting your book. So for me, there was a lot of the stuff I'd already come across before. Obviously, I'm experienced enough in social media that I'd set up all my accounts ages ago. But it did have a few little tips and tricks that I'm going to try that were useful. So definitely, if you're a writer and you get a chance to grab a copy, it's probably a worthwhile, especially if you're kind of in the early to mid stage of your career and promoting yourself. Those that are really experienced probably will know all this already, but early to mid stage career, definitely worth looking at. And the other one that I read from NetGalley was Void Star by Zachary Mason. Now, unfortunately, this is the lowest rated book of the month for me. I could only give it 2 stars. I'm not a huge sci-fi reader, but there's the odd book that I come across that I really enjoy. And the premise of this one about AI and AI going mad appealed to me, so I requested it and decided to check it out. The story idea was fine, the characters are okay, I got through from beginning to end, but I just never really connected with any of the characters. They all had their separate stories running simultaneously, and eventually it draws them all together for the conclusion, but I never cared about any of them. And I was reading, they were in danger, just didn't give a damn really. I just never got to that point where the author had pulled me into the story and I shut off the outside world. All I wanted to know was what was going to happen. It just never hit me like that. So, I mean, I know Zachary Mason is a pretty well-respected author in sci-fi, so if you're a fan of his, then potentially you're going to love this book. But for me, coming to it as a only occasional sci-fi reader, it just didn't grab me in the way I'd hoped it would. 3 to go. So the next one, or the next 2, are ones that I read in paperback, hardback. The first one, The Romance of the Forest by Anne Radcliffe, which is another Christmas gift. This is a 4-star read. I enjoy Anne Radcliffe's work. I've read all her other novels. I've enjoyed all her Gothic pieces. I have to say this is probably one of my favourites though. The story, I guess, has not more interest than the others, but it captivated me more. It's a pretty simple story, but there's a lot of sort of setting talk, and you really get a sense of place about it. The characters are, you know, fairly stereotypical Gothic characters, but still likeable, particularly Adeline. And it just moved at a lovely pace. I do find, like Udolpho and a couple of the others, I tend to have slight slow moments in between where you kind of think nothing's happened for a little while, but this one moved at a good pace all the way through and kept me turning the pages. So if you're already a fan of Gothic literature, Rummets of the Forest, definitely a good one to check out. And probably if you're new to Anne Radcliffe's, it's, I would say, a good one to start with as well, even though it's not as famous as Udolpho or The Italian. This is probably a good one to kick off because it is a really nice, easygoing one. The next one is Malory's Morte d'Arthur. I picked this up again from that second-hand book sale. I have read the entire Morte d'Arthur before. This was an abridged version, but the reason I picked it up, even though I've already got a complete copy, was because it had beautiful medieval illustrations all the way through, and it's just such an attractive book, I couldn't not get it. So it was interesting to reread a few. It's been quite a while since I read Morte d'Arthur. The only thing I'd say about this abridged version, it's beautifully illustrated, but it's still in the very archaic language, so if you're not used to reading that or not comfortable reading that, then you'd probably want to look for a version with more modernised English, because if your eye and ear aren't used to those words and that type of phrasing and sentence structure, then you're probably going to find it a slog. If you're happy to give it a go, then I do recommend the original language though, but for those that maybe aren't so keen and want something that they can just read through quickly in modern English, modern spellings, modern style, then there are versions out there that you'd probably prefer that have been modernised. So still a 4-star read. Whether you read an abridged version or the full version, it is a great collection of stories. And finally, a book that I just finished last night. I'm about to put my official review up on Goodreads and on my blog in the next hour or so. The final NetGalley read for the month was Storyland by McKinnon. This is a 3-star read for me. I enjoyed the style. I mean, if any of you have read Cloud Atlas, it's pretty much the same kind of thing as Cloud Atlas. There are these narratives set in different time periods. We go through them all in order from earliest to latest, and then we go backwards from that middle one, heading back to the earliest again. It's set in Australia. It's around the sort of New South Wales area, so it's looking at Australian history. So for anyone interested in Australian history, then you'd probably really enjoy this. I think one of the things that let it down is because it is so like Cloud Atlas. For Cloud Atlas, when I read Cloud Atlas, it was amazing because I'd never seen a book done like that before. Taking those narratives in one order, then taking them back in the other order and seeing how it all ties together. The trouble is for Storyland is it has been done before. So you don't have that novelty factor, you don't have the wow factor of something different and new in a narrative style. So while it was an enjoyable book, it only got 3 stars from me because I was just thinking of Cloud Atlas the whole time and comparing it to Cloud Atlas and thinking it didn't quite have the same scope, although it's in a good read, an interesting read. The stories have caught my interest, the characters were well described, well presented. It just didn't have that essential spark that Cloud Atlas has. So, but 3 stars still, if you're into sort of historical storytelling, interesting storytelling in terms of narrative style, you're interested in Australian history, certainly want to pick up. It's a new release, so have a look out for that one. So that's all from me for the month, a couple less than usual, but hopefully I can get back on track a bit from now on, now my back's clearing up. Otherwise, I will see you all again at